Good evening. Welcome to Inside City Hall for Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. I'm Errol Lewis. Even though Zohran Mamdani is a state assemblyman, the leader of the state assembly, Carl Hastie, has not exactly been rushing to endorse the Queens lawmaker in the race for mayor. But sources tell New York One that that is about to change. Our Dan Rivoli joins me now with that and much more from the campaign trail in tonight's top story. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening, Errol. It was just yesterday we were talking about Governor Hochul endorsing Mamdani, and now this is another major player in the Democratic establishment getting behind the upstart lawmaker. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo spoke to reporters who questioned him about his remarks in the New York Times on the war in Gaza, in which he told the paper, quote, "Return the hostages, end the violence today."
So I'm happy that he came here, and I'm happy that he wants to get a chance to say hello to the Northeast Bronx.
Carl Hastie, the Assembly Speaker, here holding the mic, sharing a stage with Zohran Mamdani after he won the Democratic primary for mayor.
Can we hear it one time for Speaker Hastie?
They'll again be together in the Bronx on Wednesday. Sources tell New York One Hastie will endorse Mamdani. This, as another poll, Marist University, shows Mamdani well ahead of the other candidates, 45% of the vote to Andrew Cuomo's 24%, and leading Cuomo in a hypothetical one-on-one matchup. Meanwhile, Cuomo spoke to school safety agents at a Teamsters local rally for the former governor. There, he took questions from reporters about his views on Israel and the warring in Gaza, the day after he told the New York Times that it should end today, return the hostages, end the violence. Cuomo on Tuesday said he's always been 100% pro-Israel.
Of course, we want the carnage to stop. And of course, we need to eliminate Hamas. That's what the end game to all of this has to be, and the sooner it ends, the better.
Meanwhile, Mayor Eric Adams was talking trash, garbage that is, bringing these rat-proof trash containers to Fort Greene, Brooklyn. As for the mayor's case for re-election,
I cannot control the price of bread, but we put bread back in the pockets of New Yorkers at the tune of $30 billion, $30 billion. And the goal is to build more housing. Many of these communities were not building housing fast enough.
Republican Curtis Sliwa, here handing out campaign business cards, was unfazed by his third place in the polls.
I am the law and order candidate.
Sliwa, here with his wife Nancy, said crime, public safety, and quality of life are the issues voters, particularly women, tell pollsters they care about the most in this election.
These are the issues that I have a laser focus on.
And again vowed to stay in this race until the end. As Sliwa said, he'll be releasing his second ad in the race. He calls it Improve, Don't Move, and it will highlight his decades of imploring New Yorkers not to cut and run, stay in New York, make it a better city.
Okay, busy day on the campaign trail. What did the mayor mean by, what did he say, $30 billion that he put in New Yorkers' pockets?
Right. He calls it, give the money in your pocket, his initiative as mayor. When the mayor talks to reporters, he is complaining a lot. The media is out to sabotage his campaign. Andrew Cuomo's been sabotaging his campaign. The rumors, or rather what we would say, the reporting that he's being offered jobs to get out of the race. That's what he really focuses his time on. That was a little bit of him actually talking about the achievements he says he's had and that has earned him re-election. And he says he just has to get that message out to voters.
Okay, I mean, he has an open invitation to come on Inside City Hall and explain it. We've been asking his team for months and months, his campaign too. I want to bring our Ayanna Harry in for some more analysis. You were with the Cuomo campaign today, and I understand Israel was a big topic of discussion today.
It certainly was. Andrew Cuomo said he will not be meeting with any Israeli officials in New York City for the UN General Assembly, and he expounded more on his comments from the New York Times when Andrew Cuomo called the situation in Gaza horrific. Andrew Cuomo said he believes the conflict there should come to an immediate end, saying, in fact, he believes the war should have been over months ago. That's, of course, a significant change in tone for Cuomo, who previously seemed very hesitant to question the Israeli military strategy in Gaza. So we're hearing a new tone from Cuomo on the Gaza conflict, seeing new faces join his campaign, and he's stepping up campaign appearances, as that new Marist poll found among likely city voters, only 20% believe Andrew Cuomo will actually win the election. Here's more from pollster Lee Miringoff.
Cuomo needs very badly to change the narrative of this race because he's not doing well with very liberal, progressive voters in New York. And that's, look, in New York City, that really counts. because those are the group, they're about 40% of the electorate, and you can't be getting clobbered among that group of voters.
And that Marist poll also found 44% of Democrats have a very unfavorable view towards Cuomo. But you see the numbers right there, Errol. Zohran Mamdani with that 21-point lead. And here we are 7 weeks from Election Day.
Did Cuomo seem like he's that far behind? I mean, is he campaigning with confidence? Is he different than he was when we were in the primary season?
He is certainly campaigning with more confidence. And we see him out connecting with different constituencies throughout the city. So yesterday evening, we were in Inwood with Andrew Cuomo after he met with bodega owners. Earlier today, we were in Chelsea where Andrew Cuomo spoke with school safety agents. So he's talking to more New Yorkers, trying to get his message out and really tailoring his message to each audience. So with the school safety agents today, he spoke a lot about their numbers, their staffing levels, and said during his first 100 days, he would hire a new class of school safety agents to bring their numbers up to 5,000. So he's really trying to appeal to people, meet them where they are. But with 7 weeks to go and such a large gap, we still have yet to see whether or not this new, more energized campaign, I will say it is, but it may be too little too late. We'll have to see.
Yeah, we are 7 Tuesdays away. And I mean, the one clear message that seems to have come across from the primary and beyond is that affordability is going to be the number one issue in this race.
Right. And I noticed Andrew Cuomo had, when he's out, always talks about Mamdani, his fitness for office. He finds him unfit. Curtis Sliwa, of course, criticizes Mamdani and his word salad. He can't articulate public safety in a way that Sliwa thinks is what New Yorkers want. And I think you've seen a little bit more on the policy. We just got Andrew Cuomo. It was a closed press event, but he met with the Building Congress and talked about his plans for affordable housing, reducing the red tape around permitting and seeing all those rent-controlled apartments that have been taken offline, getting landlords to put them back on the rental market. So he is trying to talk about affordability, which is one of the key issues in the race, and not just make it more about negativity on Mamdani, try to show his vision on how he can help New Yorkers make it.
Errol, one number that stood out to me from that Marist poll is 88% of New Yorkers said the city was not affordable. 88%. So it's clear why Zohran Mamdani is doing so well. You take an issue that overwhelmingly unites New Yorkers and you put that at the top of your campaign, it's going to resonate.
Right. And that has been, I guess, the theme all along is that he's offering solutions, even if the solutions are not particularly earth-shaking or even plausible, right? I mean, when people say, oh, he can't freeze everybody's rent. Well, that's true.
Correct.
But that's not why people are interested in what he's saying. They're interested because he's talking about what they care about.
Absolutely. That is precisely what I hear when I'm out throughout the city speaking to voters, particularly young voters, Gen Z and millennial voters. They recognize, look, Zohran Mamdani, he's going to be a relatively young mayor. He's going to take time for him to build up that political capital, but they just appreciate that he's even having this conversation about issues that matter so deeply for so many across the city.
All right. Thank you, Ayanna. Thank you, Dan. Before we head to break, a quick reminder that Inside City Hall is streaming on New York One's YouTube channel every weeknight, and full episodes are being posted on the Spectrum News app. Every Tuesday, we're also opening the app on our YouTube channel for everybody to stream our coverage as we count down to Election Day. We're going to take a short break, and we've got a packed show ahead for you. Coming up, our series that breaks down the biggest issues on top of mind for voters is going to continue. Tonight, we will focus on public safety. Then I'll be joined by Kenny Burgos, the CEO of the New York Apartment Association, to talk about the city's housing crisis. Later on, I'll be speaking with Christine Quinn, the president and CEO of the nonprofit organization WIN, about how federal cuts will impact low-income New Yorkers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. With Election Day fast approaching, every Tuesday we are taking a look at some of the biggest issues facing New York City. Tonight we're going to focus on public safety. New York One's Dean Meminger took a look at the candidates and their stances and the role that this issue is playing in the race for mayor. He joins us now to break it all down. Good evening, Dean.
Well, good evening to you. The good news here, murders and shootings are down so far this year, Errol, but we continue to have these very shocking cases of violence across the city. So that means public safety definitely on the minds of voters and the candidates. Front-runner and Democratic nominee for mayor Zohran Mamdani says he's facing the issues causing crime head-on.
There is no room for gun violence in this borough or anywhere in this city.
Mamdani says he wants to protect New Yorkers by creating a Department of Community Safety with a budget of $1 billion. Among multiple responsibilities, it would increase funding for the crisis management system. This is a community-based approach that aims to stop gun violence between young people. Mamdani is also calling for more assistance for the mentally ill and homeless, as well as subway safety teams. He says the goal is to free up cops to patrol more and investigate crimes.
What we have ended up with is police officers responding to 200,000 mental health calls a year. And that cannot be separated from the fact that response times have increased by 20% over the last few years.
Mayor Eric Adams, who is a retired NYPD captain, has consistently pushed the slogan, "Public safety is the prerequisite for prosperity in the city." As the incumbent, he has the advantage of physically showing how he responds to crime. In recent weeks, he said he surged 1,000 additional cops into the Bronx to combat an increase in shootings and murders. His police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, has pushed quality of life teams across the city to respond to complaints from residents.
I walk these streets. I patrol these streets. I live in this community. I know what we have gone through, and I know we can't go backwards.
Under Mayor Adams, murders are down 17% so far this year compared to last year during the same time period, and shootings are down 15%. Overall, major crime down about 4%. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo is presenting himself as a law and order man. If elected, he says his first priority would be safety, promising to increase the NYPD by 5,000 cops.
Because we are at one of the lowest levels of police officer staffing since the 90s. And we know that more police are part of the solution.
Cuomo also says under his leadership, more NYPD and MTA officers would patrol the subway system. And Republican Curtis Sliwa is also pushing fighting crime at the top of his agenda. He founded the Citizen Patrol, Guardian Angels, back in 1979, and says he won't hesitate to lock up all criminals.
I'm the street guy. I'm the proud Republican running on the law and order platform, the quality of life platform. And we're not just going to crack down on the gangbangers and all the gunslingers and drug dealers. We're going to make sure that we got programs to keep them out of harm's way.
A lot of promises from all of the candidates to make the city safer if they get the job at City Hall. All also pushing social service programs to help people avoid getting involved in criminal activity. All right, the candidates have their plans, but Errol, as we know, it only takes something on the street major to happen. It could be a terrorism attack, it could be some serial killer, or it could be that a bunch of kids cause a bunch of shootings, and then all of the plans that you have to maneuver in a different way.
Sure. I mean, look, the one thing that they have at the NYPD, even despite dwindling numbers, are lots and lots of cops who can be surged 1,000 into the cops. Very few departments anywhere in the world can do that. So the next mayor will have those resources, but is there talk about deploying them differently, about, sort of trying to get smarter about it as opposed to just sending what they call cops on dots, right? You find a bunch of crime and you send a bunch of cops.
Well, I mean, that's something that Eric Adams is doing now with Jessica Tisch. They say they are being smarter, really targeting certain areas, looking at the numbers, not just surging the Bronx. They had to because it was multiple shootings, right? But then you have Zohran Mamdani who's talking about not using the officers, but perhaps using other agencies to help reduce crime by preventing it. And, Cuomo wants more police officers and he wants the cops out there. And, Curtis Sliwa, Guardian Angel, he says, he's going to arrest anybody. If you commit a crime, I'm going to lock you up. But a lot of plans out there, but it's important to mention, I like to go back and look at the history. In the early 1990s, 1990 to 1992, we had between 2,000 and 2,200 murders in our city. Last year, we had fewer than 400. So murders are way down. The city is not as dangerous as it used to be. Can be better, but...
Okay, worth keeping in mind. Thanks very much, Dean.
All right.
We are going to take a break here, and when we come back, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke says that she is concerned that President Trump is whitewashing African-American history. We'll explain why in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The chair of the influential Congressional Black Caucus, Brooklyn's own Yvette Clarke, says that President Donald Trump is in denial about American history. Her comments come as the White House is reportedly urging the removal of slavery exhibits at various national parks. Kevin Fry in our Washington, D.C. bureau joins me now with the latest on this. Good evening, Kevin.
Yeah, good evening, Errol. And this, of course, is coming within the context of really the second Trump administration, where we have seen the president really take aim and go after and really try to take over various cultural institutions, from museums to art and music venues.
The American people have a right to know history in its entirety, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we have it all.
A warning from the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, Yvette Clarke, who says President Donald Trump is trying to whitewash American history. This week, the Washington Post reported that the White House has ordered the removal of signs and exhibits related to slavery at multiple national parks, including reportedly this image, showing the scars on the back of an escaped slave.
Clearly, they're saying that they don't want to acknowledge all that has taken place from the day that the first captives were brought to the shores of the United States of America, straight through the Jim Crow civil rights era to today.
Since returning to the White House, the president has taken aim at various cultural institutions, including the Kennedy Center and the Smithsonian, casting them as too woke. In March, he signed an executive order directing the removal of, quote, corrosive ideology from museums and other institutions, in particular anything that inappropriately disparages Americans past or living.
We like a little more positivity. It was all about all the bad things in our country. I said, what about the good things?
In a social media post last month, he complained about the Smithsonian's presentation of history, writing, quote, everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was. Clarke argues America must be honest about its history so that past mistakes are not repeated. She says the Congressional Black Caucus will work to shed a light on the truth.
History is history, and history will record the fact that in the year 2025, under the Trump administration, all these historical artifacts were removed in an attempt to distort history.
Now, in a statement, the White House is pushing back on this latest Washington Post report about those slavery exhibits. Here's the quote. It says, "This is fake news. No decisions have been made on this exhibit. It is under review to ensure compliance with the executive order." Errol.
So now, I mean, the executive order does exist. Federal employees have been instructed to remove the materials that might offend the president, although it's not clear exactly how that's going to play out. Is this a sign, that statement from the office, is this a sign that maybe they're going to put some thought into this?
I mean, you have to kind of put this through, I'll put it this way, the Washington Post is now, as of this moment, not the only institution that is reporting this, that they have been directed to move in this sort of direction. And so unless there is some backtracking going on from the White House, there is a possibility that this statement is not fully in compliance with what is actually going on. We just do not know.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. There are places, here in the city, we have the African Burial Ground, right? It's a federal site.
Yeah.
That's the whole meaning of the thing, right? There's at least one I know in Mississippi, where it was one of the largest slave markets in the history of the country. It's in a national park. I don't know how you make people not see that if that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, and the Washington Post article gets into, for example, an exhibit at Independence Mall in Philadelphia, where there was a home that once belonged to, or at least was occupied by George Washington, where it tells the story of slaves that worked in that capacity. And that is seemingly not in compliance with this directive, and it seems to be not wanting to basically disparage the founding fathers. You can extrapolate beyond that.
Okay, we'll see how this all works out. Thank you very much, Kevin. We're also following the latest developments in the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old man from Utah, was charged today on multiple counts, including aggravated murder. Utah prosecutors say that Robinson's DNA was found on the trigger of the rifle that fired the shot last Wednesday. They also revealed a text message confession and a note which stated his intention to kill Kirk. Robinson could face the death penalty if convicted. In related news, a judge this morning tossed out state terrorism charges against Luigi Mangione in the killing of the United Healthcare CEO last December. The judge did, however, let the state's second-degree murder charges against Mangione stand. In a written decision, the judge said that although there is no doubt the killing was not an ordinary crime, state law in New York does not consider terrorism simply because of ideological motives. Today marked Mangione's first court appearance in the state since February. Pretrial hearings are scheduled to begin on December 1st. It is time for a break. When we come back, I'll be joined in studio by Kenny Burgos, the CEO of the New York Apartment Association. We'll talk about the housing crisis from the perspective of small landlords. Stay with us.
Need to provide tax relief to buildings that are 100% or nearly 100% stabilized. Because if we don't, renters will keep shouldering New York's property tax burden and the backbone of affordable housing won't survive.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. That was just one of the many social media videos put together by my next guest. He's an advocate for landlords. Kenny Burgos offers solutions to the city's ongoing problems with affordable housing. The housing crisis, of course, has taken center stage in the race for mayor, with the candidates rolling out plans to make the 5 boroughs a more affordable and accessible place for renters. But some smaller landlords are concerned that any major change may create even more problems for those who are trying to manage multifamily homes amid rising costs. Now, joining me to talk through some of the issues here is Kenny Burgos, the CEO of the New York Apartment Association. It represents landlords for rent-stabilized apartments. And if the name looks familiar to you, he was a Bronx State Assemblyman from 2020 to 2024. Welcome back to the program. Always good to see you.
Always good to see you, Errol.
So now, as we've been reporting, 88% in this new Marist College poll of adults citywide say that the city's not affordable at all. What do you make of the accusation that the housing component of it is due to landlords? Because you've made a case that we're going to talk about that landlords may be part of the question, but they're not all succeeding in this. They're getting hurt too.
Absolutely. And I'll first start by saying, as you mentioned, before this, I was a former state lawmaker, and the number one issue I addressed was affordability, and I continue to address that even through my role now. And the problem has been housing for most New Yorkers because of policy, and this is what people have to understand. The policy choices set by policymakers is what dictates our housing landscape right now. So our owners are facing rising costs just like every New Yorker is. They're being squeezed. We're seeing buildings in distress and falling apart. So the solution exists in the halls of government, both at the legislature and city council, and that's where I focus my attention.
You had a video that I found really, really interesting where you went through the cost of a rent-stabilized apartment, and it was for that particular building. This is not generalizable, but it's a common problem, which is that when you add up the property taxes and the insurance, just those two costs, before you've even paid for the mortgage or done any repairs or anything, the unit is costing $1,200 a month.
Correct.
So you'll never get rents down if that's the case, because these are extraordinarily high. These are the highest insurance costs in the whole country.
Absolutely. We're seeing in the Bronx doubling and tripling, and many insurers are actually leaving that borough. And rent-stabilized buildings, particularly pre-1974 ones, are the most overtaxed buildings in the entire city of New York. So this cost cannot be ignored when you talk about the rents happening in New York City when the average cost to operate is $1,200. If we want to see affordability, if you want to see rents go down, we have to have the conversation about the cost and the expenses that go into operating this housing. If we're not, then we're beating around the bush here.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too deep into the math, but there's an argument, and this is what the Rent Guidelines Board looks at, that the average operating profit was something like 12%. You've put out videos and you've looked at the numbers and you said, look, that can be a little bit misleading, but there are lots and lots of buildings where they are 100% rent stabilized. They've got that, $1,200 a month sort of a problem, but they're not charging even $1,200. They're charging $800, $900, $500 a month, and they're losing money on every unit every month. How many buildings are in that kind of shape, and how many units are we talking about?
Well, there's thousands. Right now, the NYU Furman Center, the Citizens Budget Commission says about 5,000 buildings are in financial distress. We think it's much higher than that. And back to the points that you were making, right? The median rent for rent-stabilized apartments is $1,500. Most people are mind blown when they hear that because the headlines are always rents in New York City are sky high, and that's absolutely true, but people are conflating the contracted rents for people who are leasing out apartments right now, not the people who aren't giving up their great deals that have existed since 1974.
Right.
And this is the problem when you're charging 1974 rent with 2025 expenses. This math is never going to check out. And this is why this housing stock is falling apart very quickly, and it has a complete domino effect on the remainder of housing throughout the city of New York. You can't say that market rate housing and rent stabilized housing and their experience and their destinies are completely separate. I mean, they're connected. This is the renter experience.
I saw these credible estimates that something like 200,000 rent stabilized apartments are in buildings that are functionally bankrupt, is what you're talking about. What's the path out of that? What's the solution you would propose?
Well, as I keep saying, reduce the cost of operating this housing. The number one cost—
cut the property tax?
It's property tax. It is the biggest expense by far. So I'm happy this is taking center stage in this conversation on the mayoral race, but if we're not going to actually address it, I'm skeptical, right? Because the leading contender for mayor is talking about property taxes, but he also has other proposals that cost in the billions of dollars. And the number one funding source for the city of New York is property taxes. So I don't see any mayor of New York City cutting their number one funding source for their pet projects, if you will. But this is how we reduce this cost. And let's really set the stage here. 200,000 apartments is huge. NYCHA runs in 174,000 apartments right now. So we're saying at scale, essentially, we have a second NYCHA on our hands, and that number is growing. And this is why I've been raising this alarm bell since before having this role, since I was elected official. And I continue to do so because I truly believe in this city. I believe in affordability. I believe that the housing crisis is the crisis of our generation. I just believe we have to arrive there in a different direction than most candidates are proposing right now.
Well, look, there are a couple of things that didn't exist before, but let's see if we can cut through this knot, right? One thing that didn't exist before is the technology, frankly, the coding skills, the ability to analyze building by building and figure out what kind of a property tax break for a particular building would enable it to become solvent again or to reduce rents, frankly, on a certain number of units, right? I mean, there's a conversation that can be had there. I mean, it reminds me in some ways of the old J51 program, not suggesting that be revived, but some kind of conversation could go on there, right?
We can absolutely have the conversation. There's obviously, some state statute we have to work around just based on what the property tax law is. But that's a conversation that we're willing to have here. Again, all of our advocacy, my advocacy, is centered around that same affordability we all want to get to. And property tax is the beginning and the end of this conversation.
You've talked about how rent freezes, while a temporary solution for individuals who get the freeze, is not a long-term solution. Why not?
It's a Band-Aid, right? So rent freeze, right? I'll say this. The New York Times did a poll and said 69% of New Yorkers support a rent freeze for 1 million apartments. We polled and asked the same question, but we said rent freeze for 40% of apartments, which is the 1 million in the entire pie here. And the support dropped to 58%. We then asked New Yorkers, would you support a rent freeze on 40% of apartments if it meant a potential increase on the remaining 60%? The support fell off a cliff to 32% because New Yorkers aren't fools, and they understand a rent freeze for less than half of the market will result on the market rate units going up. Why? Because there are buildings that have a mixed regulated status, and those expenses have to get pushed off to those tenants. And we've talked to many owners that tested that that's what's going to happen. But on top of that, as I said, what happens in rent stabilized housing when there's 1 million apartments affects the entirety of the 2.3 million rental units in New York City. That cannot be ignored.
Is it impossible to have this conversation in the legislature, the place where you used to work? I mean, I get the basic political math that, a member of the assembly, for example, who's got a bunch of big rent-stabilized buildings, we're talking about dozens, if not hundreds, maybe even thousands of votes, they're going to cater to those folks and tell them what they want to hear and make sure that they're taken care of on some level. But this larger conversation about okay, we're going to have to change this a little bit. We're going to have to get the insurance costs down. We're going to have to get the property taxes down. We're going to have to change who gets rent-stabilized housing and how we pass it on and that sort of a thing. Is it politically possible to have that conversation?
Like every guy in New York City with a microphone, I also have a podcast, and I close out my podcast by saying every time, good housing policy starts with good conversation. Because to me, that is the crux of what we're missing in our politics overall, but certainly around housing. And the legislature is no different. My time there, I saw the same thing, right? What we have are policies being proposed, like a rent freeze, that is not policy. You're picking winners and losers. You're picking a winner who's going to get a freeze for maybe 4 years and maybe have an expense increase at the end, and losers who will not see that freeze and instead an increase. But the legislature is a victim of this as well. It's hard to have these conversations when, of course, you have representatives who represent a different constituency. But also the biggest part is the threat of the of advocates on either end, whether it be for housing, whether it be for tenants, who are so charged in this conversation they don't allow a space to have a simple conversation. And this is what I strive to have every time I open my doors to anyone who's willing to have a factual, data-based conversation around housing that's centered and connected to trying to make housing more affordable for New Yorkers across the city.
You were in the assembly with Zohran Mamdani, and I think you guys, weren't you guys at Bronx Science at the same time?
We went to Bronx Science. We actually sat next to each other in the chamber.
Okay, so you can sit and chat with him about that. You can have that conversation if he becomes mayor, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've had the conversation both pre-primary, post-primary. But listen, I understand.
He's open to the idea?
To which idea?
Well, the idea of sitting down and talking and, sort of reconfiguring expenses, incentives, and taxes so that these buildings don't continue to remain functionally bankrupt.
I will say we've had good conversation. I will say I think he is willing to have conversation with most folks in this industry. I won't put words in his mouth and say that's what he's willing to do, but if he is, I'm here any time of the day.
Your group endorsed Cuomo in the primary. Are you still endorsing him in the general?
We didn't endorse. What happened? We were not going to get involved in the primary, but we saw, and I saw very quickly, that Mamdani was about to win because, again, I know him personally. I saw where the race was headed. So I decided we had to put some money in to try and stop his eventual win in the primary, but that wasn't an endorsement at this time. It's pretty clear to me based on our polling and others' polling, it's likely Mayor Mamdani.
Go talk to your classmate. We'll talk again soon. Thanks a lot for coming in. Let's take a break now. When we come back, New York One's neighborhood series continues in Mott Haven. We'll bring you a look at some of the top issues that voters are concerned about up there in the Bronx ahead of Election Day. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall as we continue New York One's neighborhood series highlighting the issues that matter most to voters ahead of Election Day. Tonight we're going to focus on Mott Haven in the Bronx. Residents there say that they are struggling with gun violence and putting food on the table and, of course, affordable housing. The neighborhood is expected to be home to a borough-based jail as well, resulting from the city's plan to dismantle and close Rikers Island. Our Bernadette Hogan spoke to New Yorkers in Mott Haven and joins us now with the results. Good evening, Bernadette.
Good evening, Errol. And the Bronx in its totality is a highly Democratic area. And Mott Haven, actually, just looking at the election results from the June primary, shows that the primary voters did end up going more towards Cuomo. And of course, frontrunner Zohran Mamdani has some work to do in that borough.
The people are great. Resilient people.
Born and raised in the Bronx's Mott Haven section, Clarissa Alieto still lives and works in the neighborhood. Now, chair of the Bronx's Community Board 1.
You know, I grew up in the projects here and in public housing, and while we have our issues, we're a pretty tight community.
Speaking to New York One down the street from where she grew up in NYCHA's Patterson houses.
Past the bridge on Alexander Avenue, you have the more gentrified community where, you know, mass development has happened in the last 10 years. On this side of town, you have the majority of the public housing developments. It's a divide. It's like Tales of Two Cities, right?
Construction already started for the new jail complex at East 141st Street, the Bronx's sole detention site, eventually replacing Rikers Island. The community board voted unanimously against the project.
There are homes around the jail. You know, there are schools around the jail, so there's real concern about it. We're surrounded by, they put everything here, you know, from the homeless shelters to the jails. I mean, the South Bronx is always the place for the services.
Off 3rd Avenue, below 149th Street, Roberto Clemente Plaza has been barricaded off from the public by the NYPD since July because of quality of life complaints, mainly drugs. The head of the Business Improvement District, Pedro Suarez, says police presence has not stopped the drug use. He wonders whether the same activity would be tolerated in another neighborhood.
We have a very, very strong-knit community here that really wants to stay here. And so we want to make sure that people don't have to leave to get the things that they need.
Data from NYU's Furman Center show Mott Haven, with nearby Melrose, as the 4th biggest non-white community in the city, with a majority of Hispanic and Black population. In 2023, the poverty rate was over 36%, almost double the city's 18% overall average.
1979.
So you've seen a lot of changes.
Seen a lot. It's a whole lot of changes. Right. It's a whole lot. We have more to offer the kids. But, you know, we don't got sponsors like we had before.
Aunt May lives in NYCHA's Mitchell Housing Complex. She's raised her kids' kids, and mentors countless others. She says politicians need to stop taking the borough for granted.
But where are you? You're only in Manhattan. You're in the good neighborhood. Come to us. Let us talk. No, you don't.
June primary results show Andrew Cuomo won the Bronx with over 59,500 votes, over Zohran Mamdani's 39,100 votes. Comparing 2020 presidential results, the heavily Democratic borough shifted slightly closer toward President Trump in 2024.
Seniors who are 60, 70, 80 years old standing on line to get a bag of fresh produce. That's scary, but I think that it's a reality check for the Dems here. We've got to do something different.
Although she ran unsuccessfully for the city council, Alieto says it's because she wants to improve housing, education, issues of hunger, gun violence, and the opioid crisis, explaining, if not her, who will stand up for her community.
This is the turning point, and it can turn for the worst, or it can turn for the best.
No, Errol, there's just so many other issues that we could pack into this piece about this specific neighborhood, about what it's been through, about what's coming. I mean, if you look at the history of disinvestments, the Bronx burning, buildings being burned out, and also just promises from federal and city funding and it not coming, to now some of it maybe being on the way. You know, there's just so many other angles one could take.
It's striking how so much of what the candidates have been talking about kind of goes past people in this particular neighborhood,
Right.
meaning, you know, rent freeze wouldn't apply to NYCHA housing.
Right.
So that's off the table. And then, you know, it's apparently they've already brought more cops into the neighborhood, which some of the candidates are proposing.
Right.
And it didn't necessarily make that much of a difference.
And even just talking about the NYCHA housing, like one person who's not included in the piece who I spoke to is the city councilwoman outgoing Diana Ayala, who talked to me about how she has been fighting for additional investments to just improve individual residents' homes. But then when it ends up going to the entire NYCHA community, it doesn't necessarily go to those places where these candidates or these people in office fought for. And when it comes to drug use and the NYPD presence in the Roberto Clemente Plaza, you know, this is a heavily trafficked business district. Cops have barricaded off this plaza, but then they're just observing potential drug use going on just streets away. You know, I walked through some of these people, and those that are trying to keep it under wraps, they say we want families to be able to walk through the same way that we were able to when we were younger. So
Sure.
It's evolving and ongoing issues.
Okay, great reporting. Thanks very much, Bernadette. We are going to take a break now, and when we come back, I'll be speaking with Christine Quinn, the CEO of the homeless shelter organization WIN, about how federal cuts could affect our city and lead to a rise in family homelessness. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Hundreds of families living in our city could end up homeless as a result of cuts included in President Trump's new spending plan. That's according to a new report by the homeless shelter nonprofit organization WIN. In addition to the cuts to health insurance and food assistance that we've covered in recent months, the president's plan would also slash funding to federal rental assistance programs and public housing. The dangers posed by the cuts and how the city is preparing or not preparing were the focus of a city council hearing just yesterday, a hearing that the Adams administration skipped. Joining me now to talk more about what is facing our city is former City Council Speaker Christine Quinn. She serves as the president and CEO of WIN. Welcome back to the program. Great to see you. So the legislation, I guess the summary is that about $15.4 billion is jeopardized that would be taken away from New York. Up to 1.5 million in our state could lose their health coverage, I guess half at least in the city. Over 260,000 could immediately lose food assistance benefits. This will have catastrophic results, is what you're suggesting.
Massive. It will have massive, terrible results. And what we have to do in response to that is continue to fight the budget proposals. And we have to support our elected officials who are doing that and push the ones who aren't doing that. I want to say, you know, a lot of what's in the Senate and the House budget is better, not better enough, but is a step in the right direction. And then when it's all said and done, whatever we lose, and I hope it's less, not giving up the fight, but whatever we lose, the city and the state have to fill that gap. Right now, we are at an all-time high of people in shelter in the city. That's not even including people on the street. And 70% of the people in shelter are families with children. There are more children in shelter tonight than there are seats in Yankee Stadium. If we let these cuts go through one way or the other, those numbers will skyrocket.
Do you think, I mean, it's unclear how all of this is going to play out, but there's been some talk about Democrats withholding their votes and actually sort of causing the government to grind to a halt later this month if some of these deep cuts continue.
I mean, that is a strategy that is being considered. You know, obviously that's a tough choice because then you kind of leave a lot in the hands of President Trump exclusively, which is obviously very dangerous because he's a person who proposed these cuts. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about things like 9,000 people losing supportive housing. We run supportive housing. It's permanent housing with special needs services. So the most vulnerable New Yorkers, the people don't want on the street, right? People with mental illness, substance abuse issues, losing their subsidies and losing their home.
Yeah. That's. I mean, in fact, I want to draw extra attention to that. I saw it in your report. These are people who need the so-called wraparound services. These are people who are not on their own going to be able to find an apartment. And the problem here is that there are going to be 2-year time limits on their support from Washington and cuts to what's called continuum of care.
Right.
So, I mean, this is reminiscent in a prior generation of what happened with deinstitutionalization, where they closed Willowbrook and some of the big, poorly run mental health facilities, and people just ended up on the street because there was nothing there. So we certainly want to avoid that. 9,000 residents is a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, we could, like that at Wynn, lose almost $4 million. We run 5 congregate supportive housing, 200 apartments. These are people who can only thrive independently with extra help. Exactly the kind of people you want to get extra help. Domestic violence survivors, people who've aged out of foster care and have a child, substance abuse, mental health. It makes no sense. They'll end up on the street and back in shelter, which at the end of the day is going to cost the taxpayers more than what we were getting from the federal government.
Okay. You suggested in your support also that, higher tax on upper income New Yorkers might be a way to come up with some of the money. Are there efficiency measures as well? Because you and I have talked in the past about some things that the city could do that would really sort of save a lot of wasted money.
You know, right now, a night in shelter for one of our families is close to $300 a night. A night with our family living independently with a housing voucher is about $75 a night. So if we sped up the administrative procedures for getting people their vouchers so they can move out, we would save a lot of money. Right now, the average length of stay at a Wynn shelter is 11.1 months. If we could shave months off of that, it would be better for the family, really better for the children, and it would save the taxpayers money we desperately need right now.
Are administrative holds up or delays in delivering the vouchers, is that deliberate? I know in prior administrations, sometimes it was seen as what's called a moral hazard question to make sure people aren't faking, so you make them wait long enough to ensure that they really do need it.
There used to be a rule that said you had to be in shelter 90 days before you could even apply, and that's a lengthy process. I think that was a holdover from the Giuliani administration who wanted to make people suffer. I think now that is really gone. It's just bureaucracy at its worst. The commissioner, Molly Park, is trying to address it, but it needs to be sped up quickly.
Okay. Of the candidates who are running for mayor now, does any have a set of policies or proposals that you think is especially interesting and worth thinking about for the next 4 years?
Well, no one in the mayor's race in the primary or in the general, in my opinion, has paid enough attention to the issue of homelessness, family homelessness, or how we generate more housing. That said, there are a number of really bad things that Eric Adams has done recently that would really penalize homeless people, put them at risk of losing their permanent housing. Mamdani is the only candidate in the race now who has said that he will roll those back immediately if he takes mayor.
Say more about that. What in particular are you talking about?
So right now, if you're a homeless person and you have a voucher, you pay 30% of your income towards your rent. The voucher covers the rest. Mayor Adams has changed it so at a certain point, you have to pay 40% of your income into it. That is extremely rent burdened. No homeless person is going to see their income, formerly homeless person, go up that much. Candidate Mamdani has signed a pledge saying he will immediately go back to 30%, among other commitments.
Okay. We'll have to take this up with them at the debate. Thanks so much for coming by. Great talking talking with you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great evening. We'll see you next time inside City Hall.